This video is going to prepare you for the core subjects EC-6 social studies test. My name's Scott Roselle and I've helped thousands of teachers pass the core subjects EC-6, and today I'm going to help you. And this video is going to cover three things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the most likely concepts that are going to be on the test, and we're going to look at a few practice questions. As a bonus, if you've already taken the test, at the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to read and interpret your score report. So keep watching. Now, the core subjects EC-6 social studies consist of 5 areas, or competencies: social science instruction, geography and culture, history, economics, and government and citizenship. Now, I know this because Educational Testing Services, or ETS, they're the testing provider. They give out these really helpful PDFs called ETS preparation manuals. Now, these ETS preparation manuals break down each ETS exam, and they'll look at the domains, the competencies, and really what can be in each competency. So if ETS gives you this breakdown, why are you watching this video? Good question. This video is incredibly helpful and specific where ETS is incredibly vague. Now, I'm gonna give you a couple examples. Competency 2, which is history, item B states that a beginning teacher needs to analyze how individuals, events, and issues shape the history of Texas, the United States, and even the world. G, thanks. Competency 4 of economics, item A, compare and contrast similarities, differences, and how various people at different times in history have lived and met basic human needs, including the various roles of men, women, children, families, and past and present cultures. Where do you even begin? And even when the ETS preparation manual is specific, it's still vague. Competency 2, back in history. Item S, demonstrates an understanding of the foundations of representative government in the United States, significant individuals, events and issues of the Revolutionary era, and challenges confronting the United States government in the early years of the Republic. A little bit more specific instead of know everything that's ever happened in the history of the world. But what does the test mean by significant individuals or significant events? This is one of the tricky parts about studying, especially social studies, because what do the test makers deem as significant events? So studying for the test can be a bit confusing, and I'm gonna show you 2 ways to go about it, and they're both equally valid options. The first option is to simply Google significant individuals from the Revolutionary War. So once you Google that, you take the first 3 or 4 results and you open each one into a new tab. Then you click through each tab and you look at the significant individuals on that page. Now what this is going to do, it's going to give you a really good idea about who the significant individuals were in the Revolutionary War and why they were significant. And because it's Google, chances are you're going to get the information that you need. But here's the catch. You have to do that for every single point in the ETS preparation manual. Now there are 97 points in the social studies alone, so that's 97 Google searches, 291 specific pages to look at, and that's just the beginning. You're gonna spend tens if not hundreds of hours looking over all the web pages, trying to figure out and hoping you're getting the right information. And you'll find some stuff you don't need to know. And hopefully by the end of it, most of your time's pretty well spent. But that's only if you know exactly what to search for each of the 97 searches. I don't even know how I would begin to search for this point to figure out what the answer is. But even that assumes you know what to search for on each of those 97 points. I mean, how would you search for compare and contrast similarities and differences in how various peoples at different times in history have lived and met basic human needs, including the various roles of men, women, children, families, and past and present cultures? You need to know every way people made money and how men, women, and children and families as a whole made money all the way from probably ancient Egypt to today. And you need to know it for every single culture. Gee, thanks ETS. Helpful. A little bit confusing. Which brings me to the second way to study, and it's a lot simpler. Use a study guide. Now, I personally recommend the 240 Tutoring Study Guide because it has authentic practice questions, targeted instructional content, simple and reliable flashcards, plus a full-length practice test. It comes with a 48-hour guarantee and the 240 Tutoring Guarantee, which is if you score 90% on the practice test but fail the actual exam, you get your money back. You can find out more at 240tutoring.com. Now let's skip to what you're probably waiting for, is a super helpful part of the video, the specific concepts that are likely to appear broken down by competency. The first one we'll look at is social studies instruction. Now this is pretty straightforward. It's just really how do you teach social studies and the methods about researching. One thing you're gonna have to know to get these questions right is how to read charts and tables, specifically bar graph, scatter plot, pie chart, a population pyramid, or basic tables. And another one you need to know is maps, specifically topographical maps, meteorological maps, physical maps, and thematic maps. The next one's geography. Now geography's pretty much encompasses, but how does the geography of the Earth affect human behavior? Now I know I'm sounding like ETS right there, but I can narrow it down a little bit more for you. Simply put, humans respond to their environments. An easy example is that before 1900, every city founded was by some sort of water source, whether it be the ocean or a river. This is because humans need 1, fresh water, and 2, water was the easiest, most efficient form of transportation, so no city wanted to be around a slow transportation source, and a river or an ocean was the easiest way to move goods in and out of the city. That's just one example of how humans adapted their behavior to respond to the situation and circumstances of their environment. Another thing you need to know for geography is the water cycle. Specifically, there's 3 parts: evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. And then, because it's geography, you need to know major geographic features and where they are relative in the world. So you need to know things like the Sahara Desert, the Himalayan Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, the Amazon River, the Ganges River, and the Mississippi River, where they are and how they impact the peoples around them. Overall, geography is a really important one. It's going to have a lot of questions, so you really want to understand how humans interact with their environment and how the environment shapes human behavior. Now, geography is the second most broad category because it covers so much. The broadest category on the test is going to be history, because it can really cover anything from the beginning of human history till today. But with my experience, I have identified a few key concepts that are highly likely to appear on the test and gives you a nice leg up. The first one's a Columbian exchange, and this refers to the trade that was established when Columbus found the New World in 1842, and it's specifically looking at the goods introduced to the New World from the Old World and goods introduced from the Old World from the New World. Now, the second one's the Northwest Passage. Ironically, it doesn't exist, but just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it's not important. The Northwest Passage is the idea there's a sea-based trade route between North America that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, which would allow the European powers to quickly and easily establish a sea trade between themselves and China. It was the reason for exploration in the 1600s. The third one is manifest destiny. This is the idea that it was the United States' destiny to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, and it fueled westward expansion in the 1840s and 1850s. And the last one that you really should know is sectionalism. Sectionalism refers to the growing divide between the northern states and the southern states in the United States prior to the Civil War. The key points of sectionalism you should know is the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, the Mexican-American War, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, while history is incredibly broad, just knowing those 4 concepts, and you might want to do a little bit more research just so you're familiar with them, is going to help you out a lot. Now, the 4th section is economics, and economics is much more targeted in what it covers. So these concepts are even more important to know than in the previous 3. The first one is opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost really just means that the cost of an event or an action is the next best foregone alternative. Now, that sounds really fancy, but what it really means is the cost isn't how much money an action or an event costs someone, but rather what else would they do with that time or that money. Next, you'll need to know about scarcity, which just means that in this world we live in, things are not unlimited, so people have to make choices based on the priorities to get what they want because they can't have everything. The third is supply and demand. It's a basic economic concept. It basically says that economic activity is based on 2 forces, the supply and the demand of a good. And generally, when demand goes up, the supply of that good will go up. When demand goes down, the supply of that good goes down. When supplies go up, the price drops. When supplies decrease, the price increases. The fourth is comparative advantage, which basically means that some people, businesses, or nations are better at producing a certain good, and therefore they can produce it easier, more cheaply, or just plain better than other countries. When this happens, it's known as a comparative advantage. The fifth is the concept of a monopoly or an oligopoly. And no, I don't mean the board game. A monopoly is where a firm or business has complete control of a market and can set whatever price it wants. An oligopoly means that there's just a few businesses or firms that compete against each other, and sometimes they collude or they work together to set prices artificially high. And the last economic concept you should know about is mercantilism, which is the economic idea that a country's power is measured in how much gold it has. And lastly, let's look at government. Now, government, like economics, is a lot more targeted, so the concepts I'm going to go over you're much more likely to see on the real test. The first one is the Articles of Confederation. This was the first governing document that bound the United States together. The Articles created a weak federal government that couldn't respond to the challenges of the new nation, and they were eventually replaced by the Constitution of 1787. The next one is Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine in 1776. Now, Common Sense was a pamphlet that encouraged and rallied support for the American Revolution. Next, the Mayflower Compact, which was an agreement of the Pilgrims on the Mayflower to live together in a very democratic society. Now, the only non-American one on here is the Magna Carta. It was an agreement between the King of England and the nobles of England. It's one of the first documents in history to limit the power of government. Another thing likely to come up on the test is the New Deal. The New Deal is a series of economic programs passed under President Franklin D. Roosevelt to help stimulate the American economy during the Great Depression. There's 4 constitutional amendments that are really likely to be on the test: 13th, 14th, 15th, and the 19th. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment deal specifically with the issue of race in America, and they were ratified after the Civil War. These amendments outlaw slavery throughout the United States and make it illegal to prohibit someone voting based on race or ethnicity. And the 19th Amendment enabled women's suffrage, which is the ability for women to vote. And finally, for government, I've got 4 court cases that are likely to be on the test. One is Plessy v. Ferguson, which said that segregation in schools is allowed and constitutional as long as they are separate but equal. The second one is McCulloch v. Maryland, which basically said states can't get in the way of the federal government when the federal government's acting upon its constitutionally mandated power. The third is Marbury v. Madison, which established judicial review. Now, judicial review basically states that the Supreme Court can strike down a law it deems unconstitutional. And lastly, it's the Dred Scott decision, which said that slaves were property and not entitled to the rights and privileges of citizens of the United States. That was shortly overturned after the Civil War. Now that we've gone over some of the big concepts, let's look at some practice questions to show you how those concepts can appear on the test. For social studies instruction, Ms. Sims wants to demonstrate to her students how the price of gasoline has increased as the uses for gasoline have also increased. Which of the following graphs would best help Ms. Sims visually demonstrate this concept? A bar graph, a pie chart, a 2-dimensional diagram or scattergram, or a population pyramid? The correct answer is a bar graph. For which of the following reasons would a teacher use a population pyramid like the one above? To show the distribution of population based on age in the United States, to show the average age of populations in a given geographic area, to show the median ages of various socioeconomic demographics, to show the number one cause of death for a given age group. The correct answer is A. Now let's look at some geography and culture. The 3 main physical processes of water, or the hydrologic cycle, are transpiration, perspiration, and sweating, building dams, creating canals, and lowering the aquifers, evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, irrigation, desalination, insulation. Correct answer is C. Which of the following best describes the primary purpose of the first European settlers settling in the San Francisco Bay Area? The bay was a natural harbor that protected ships inside the bay from turbulent weather and conditions used outside the bay. The area is rich in oil deposits. The bay was rich with gold deposits. The bay was far from government oversight, so individuals could evade taxes on various economic goods. Correct answer is A. Which of the following is the most common reason for forests to be cut down in developing countries? To make land suitable for farming, to increase tourism destinations, to decrease carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere, to create more logging jobs? Again, correct answer is A. Let's look at some history questions. Which of the following best describes the concept of manifest destiny? America was not destined to expand from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. God's will for America was to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. Taking land from Native Americans was wrong, and Americans should not settle west of the Mississippi River. America should expand from coast to coast, but in collaboration with other European nations. Correct answer is B. Which of the following best describes the primary goal of the French explorers in North America? Establish a vibrant fur trade, establish military outposts to combat Spanish dominance of North America, convert American Indians to Christianity, discover a western sea route to trade with Asia. This one's D in regards to the Northwest Passage. Which of the following most significantly disrupted the balance of free states and slave states prior to the Civil War? The Mexican-American War, the Missouri Compromise, the presidency of Andrew Jackson, or the Texas Revolution? The correct answer is A, and it looks at sectionalism in America. Let's look at some economic questions. Mr. Scott breaks up a dispute among 2 second-grade students. In discussing the situation with the students, Mr. Scott realizes they were arguing over the use of class resources. This situation can best be used to teach which of the following economic principles? Scarcity, opportunity cost, mercantilism, or free trade? Correct answer is A. A market where a few firms compete against each other is known as a monopoly, an oligopoly, monopolistic competition, perfect competition. Correct answer is B. Mr. Smith begins a project among his 4th grade class. He gives the class $20 to purchase pencils and has the students sell them to students who have forgotten pencils at home. Which of the following economic principles can Mr. Smith's students learn from this project? Opportunity cost, supply and demand, comparative advantage, impact of imports and tariffs. Correct answer is B. Now let's look at some government questions. Which of the following Supreme Court cases established that the Supreme Court had the power to rule laws passed by Congress unconstitutional? Plessy v. Ferguson, McCulloch v. Maryland, Marbury v. Madison, Dred Scott v. Sanford. Correct answer is C. Which amendment abolished slavery in America? The 1st, 13th, 16th, or the 17th? Correct answer is B. Which constitutional amendment prohibits the denial of voting based upon race, color, or previous servitude? The 13th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, or the 21st Amendment? 15th Amendment. Answer is B. The legal doctrine known as separate but equal is instituted in which of the following cases? Plessy v. Ferguson, Brown v. Board of Education, Marbury v. Madison, Mapp v. Ohio. Correct answer is A. Now that's just a small sliver of practice questions to give you an idea about how these concepts are assessed on the test. In the beginning of the video, I said as a bonus I was going to show you how to read through a score report. So right now we're going to look at a score report and how to interpret it. Here's an example of a score report. As you can see, there are 5 competencies listed, competency 1 through competency 5. These competencies are identified and elaborated upon in the ETS preparation manual. Competency 1 is social science instruction, competency 2 is history, 3 is geography, 4 is economics, and 5 is government. Now based on the score report, the test taker seems to be scoring well in social science instruction and economics, but needs a lot of help in history, geography, and government. From this information, it would be best to focus on these 3 competencies. You can get more information specifically at what you should study in by reviewing the ETS preparation manual. If you're this far in the video, you're doing great. You are showing that you're dedicated to passing the social studies test, and I think you can do it. But you might be feeling overwhelmed, lost, intimidated, or just simply confused about where to start studying for the test. Don't worry, because do you remember how at the beginning of the video I said I help thousands of teachers each year pass the core subjects EC through 6? I can help you too. At 240 Tutoring, we've made an amazing study guide for the social studies test. It has over 275 authentic practice questions, targeted instructional content, simple and reliable flashcards, a full-length practice test. And did I mention that it's online, mobile-friendly, and can be accessed anywhere, anytime? It's got a 48-hour no questions asked refund policy, plus the 240 Tutoring guarantee. Now the 240 Tutoring guarantee says that if you score 90% on the full-length practice test, but fail the actual exam, then you're entitled to your money back. Don't waste your valuable time studying information you don't need to know. And don't waste your time wondering if you're going to pass the test. You can get the study guide today and start studying immediately. Because studying now increases your chances to pass exponentially. And you can't risk your teaching career and your teaching salary on not studying and preparing for this test. To find out more, go to 240tutoring.com, or if you have any questions, just email us. admin@240tutoring.com, say you saw us on YouTube and you've got some questions. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to helping you pass your test.